the first part of a roguelike game has to be the most interesting and replayable. It makes sense because that's the part that you're going to be replaying the most, especially if you're a beginner and you're building up the skills to get further in the game. But my first area really only had 5 things to interact with, besides the main character himself. Spikes, spiders, skeletons, the Reaper, and items to collect. Now, that's fine for starters, and pretty good for 3 weeks of development, considering everything else that also got done in the other areas. But it's definitely time to go further. So, here's how this week went. I'm Dryden Thomas, and we are 7 days into my 100-day challenge to finish Disinherited, a side-scrolling roguelike game where you descend into Death's domain to kill death and gain eternal life, all to spite your dead father, who cut you out of his will. So, for those of you who watched the competition, these devlogs are probably going to feel a little bit different than the ones that were within that video. For one thing, I have more than 90 seconds to tell you what happened in the week, so I can speak a little more slowly than a caffeinated auctioneer. Second, I plan to actually account for my mental and physical health during this challenge, so I won't be working every waking hour. Now that said, I still did get quite a bit done this week, so here we go. First, I added 2 new enemies. One of them is this ghost. I love this thing. It doesn't hurt you physically, but it has the same effect the Reaper does. When it's nearby, it drains your light faster than usual. But 2 whacks, or 1 powered up whack, and it's dealt with. I'm thinking you can then pick up this sheet and it might have some effect while you hold it. One idea I've been toying with, generally, is fall damage. It doesn't exist in the game right now, but I think it could. It's easy enough to avoid taking fall damage right now by using Samuel's wall climb ability, even if you just kind of tap on walls. And I think it would add a little need to be careful while descending. But maybe if you were holding a ghost sheet, you wouldn't take any fall damage? But let me know what you think of that whole idea in general. The other new enemy is this crawling skeleton. It may look pretty simple, but this is the first purely melee enemy in the game, which means you don't have a projectile to bash back or catch off of it. Combat up to this point has completely depended on those projectiles being there though, so what are we gonna do? Enter the melee parry. This is something that I had wanted to get in during the initial 3-week development cycle, but there were only 3 melee attacks even in the game, so it just didn't seem worth it. And it required me to rewrite a lot of how my hit detection is handled. So here's how it works. Whenever 2 opposing hitboxes overlap each other, if either one is tagged as being able to parry, you get a parry interaction. You get a quick time slow, some VFX, and a pretty satisfying sound. This shuts off the enemy hitbox and applies stun damage to the enemy. If the stun maxes out, the enemy gets, well, stunned. While stunned, they take critical damage, and you should be able to one-shot most non-boss enemies. This led to another big change, the wind-up on the dash. I've been pretty stubborn about this so far. I've insisted that feeling the bash wind up and then feeling it land as you timed it correctly is really important to the feel of the game. But once I added parrying for melee attacks, it just got too hard to time it out. See, with projectiles, you can watch them coming and you can really estimate what time they're gonna get there. But with melee, there tends to be more of a snap. I'll always include fair warning signs for attacks, but even with me having made the animation, I was still finding it way too hard to nail that consistently. However, I could also imagine there being a relic that adds the wind-up time back in, but empowers you in a different way. Speaking of relics, I designed a few more. Aegis Hylia is a shield that gives you damage reduction based on how high your light level is. If you can stay topped off, you'll have more durability. Then you've got these Twilight Slippers that raise your movement speed based on how low your light is, and a Twilight Shawl that gives you an increasing chance to dodge incoming attack damage based on the same thing. The Crystal Skull makes enemies glow. As you can probably guess from that, I'm working on making some different kind of builds that demand different styles of gameplay. And yes, dark speedrunning is gonna be a thing. Alright, now for the big new addition. The Catacombs is the first area, but it was missing something very important. Its own boss. So, here he is, Guillaume Obligé, the Gravedigger. Well, he's much more than that, but I don't want to reveal too much about him. It seems to be his duty to protect the entrance to Death's domain, but he doesn't seem all that happy about it. He's also different from the other bosses, as you'll notice from the fact that he has legs. I'll just leave it at that. So now I want to show you all my process for creating a boss. First, I come up with the overall concept. Here, he's a gravedigger, But there's a lot of different ways that a gravedigger could be designed. I mean, just ask Magic the Gathering, right? So then the first thing I'm gonna do is compare him to the silhouettes of the other characters in the game. I thought about having this ancient crypt keeper type, but Old Red Eye sort of fits that already. And then I was considering what it would be like to dig graves all day and the upper body strength that would require. So I came up with a design for just the most hulking dude with a tiny little lower body. Then I added these fence spikes, which give his silhouette a little something extra, but also reinforce his connection to his environment, as if it's a part of him. I toyed with a couple different ideas for the head too, but in the end, I wanted him to feel like the most human character in the Catacombs. Since you'll see him a lot, there's a lot of different opportunities to develop his backstory. The next step after drawing is to split up his parts, bring him into the engine, and rig him up. This is still pretty time consuming, but I'm getting better at it. My favorite part of his rig is that I made the individual spikes controllable, which adds a little extra flair to some of the animations. Then I gotta do the animations. As of now, he has 3.5 attacks, but more are on the way. His first is a simple shovel swing, which he'll sometimes follow up with another strike. You can parry both of these once you get the rhythm down, or just dodge roll or keep away from him. He also has this jump smash that you cannot parry, but it shakes bones loose from the ceiling. If you can catch one, you can throw it at him. But watch out, because he can actually parry them back. His last move for now is to dig up one of those half skeletons we talked about earlier. He can never get more than 2 at a time, but it's in your best interest to get rid of them, because you can take their skulls and sickles and use them to deal damage. After the animations, or sometimes during, I go and start scripting. Here's where I create all the transitions between the different states, and I also have to create all the states in the inspector, and here I can set the length, add sounds, VFX, or most importantly, the movement component. I also use the boss's main script to hook up any additional things like the enemy spawners or the projectile spawners. Then we add in his hitboxes, which each have data about the attacks. Most of the time I use the animations themselves to activate the hitboxes. I want to give him some more abilities like a bull rush and some kind of projectile toss. And I also want to give him a proper arena with some character, you know? Even without that though, he's already the most fun boss to fight in the game. So I'm looking forward to bringing the other bosses up to that level. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I hope to see you in the next one.